It's apple season, and in this video I'm going to show you just how easy homemade applesauce can be. And the best part, it's budget friendly and you can control what goes into your food and build your pantry at the same time. Let's get it started. Now let's say your recipe calls for 10 pounds of apples and you're not sure how much that is. Well, if you've got these medium to large size apples, 4 of these equal about 2 pounds. And if you've got small apples, like these little lunchbox size apples, 4 of these equal about 1 pound. So this is just to give you a good estimate of how many apples you're going to need for your particular recipe. And just to keep things moving along, while my applesauce is simmering, I'm going to put my jars in to sterilize. That way, when the applesauce is ready to be jarred up, I've got hot jars to put hot product in. And I'll give these apples a good scrub using a little vinegar and baking soda. That'll just help me get them nice and clean. And I really want the peels to be clean because I'm going to save the peels to make Applescrap jelly later. Now let's say you want your applesauce to be nice and smooth. Well, if that's the case, it's even easier to prep because all you do then is quarter your apples, then quarter them again. And what you'll do is you'll put these on the simmer, and once they're tender, you'll run them through a food mill, and I'll show you that. But the food mill just removes all the seeds, all the skin, so it's actually a lot simpler if you're just going to make nice smooth applesauce. And I'll set this on the stove, add about a half a cup of water, put the lid on it, and let them tenderize. Okay, let's take a look. And they're starting to tenderize nicely. And you can see there's even color on the bottom of the pot from the peels. This video is brought to you by Yes You Can, a beginner's guide to waterbath canning. If you want to learn how to waterbath can, or you're familiar with it but you just need a refresher, this course is perfect for you. Click the link in the description box below to learn more. I always give my jars a good cleaning. Even if they've been washed up before and sitting in the cabinet, I always wash them again. And keeping in mind that this applesauce is going to be processed for 20 minutes in these pint jars, the jars don't have to be sterilized. They do need to be clean, but they don't have to be sterilized because the processing time will take care of that. One concern about the stovetop canner is that they can be heavy. So I will partially fill it at the sink and then finish filling it on the stovetop with a small pot. And you want the water to be about 2 inches above the top of your jars. So I will stick my finger in and just do a rough measure with my finger. And I'll go ahead and put my new clean lids into water and set it to simmer on low. These apples are looking pretty good, but they are not quite tender enough, so I'll add a little apple juice to keep them from sticking. So these look like they're nice and tender. So let's put them in the food mill so we can have some nice, smooth applesauce. Okay, so now I'm going to just put some of these apples into this food mill and just give it a good stir. And around we go. And you can see the applesauce is coming out the bottom. Now here's the food mill. You just put your apples into the mill and then crank it, and it will separate the peelings, the seeds, the pulp. And now you see why I made it a point to give my apples a good scrubbing. I wanted to make sure there were no pesticides because I didn't want any residual pesticides in my applesauce. I've run all the apples through the food mill, so now I'll pour the rendered applesauce into a smaller pot. Now I like my applesauce a bit sweetened, so I will add 3/4 cup of sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, and a couple of cinnamon sticks. No cinnamon sticks? No problem. You can add a 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. If you like it less sweet, add less sugar. If you don't like the spices, leave them out. Then I give it a taste. Add a bit more sugar for my preferences, then let it simmer for a few more minutes. Notice that I keep scraping the bottom so it does not stick. Next, I'll remove the cinnamon sticks, and now I'm ready to jar it up. I'm going to put just a little bit of lemon juice and water just so my apples don't turn brown. So now I'm going to cut my apples into chunks. I prefer chunky applesauce with a little cinnamon in it. My husband will eat it either way, and so will I, but I prefer the cinnamon. And if I didn't get all the peeling off, I'll just keep a paring knife handy. And then keep in mind, these cores are going to be used for apple jelly. I drained the water out of the apples, and so now I put them into the pot, and now I'm going to add just a 1/2 cup of water and let them begin to cook down. And the 1/2 cup of water is just to keep them from sticking. And we'll let these simmer until soft, and then I'll crush them to the consistency that I like, and then I'll add some sugar and some cinnamon. Let's give this a stir because we don't want it to stick, so we do need to stir it from time to time. And I only put in a 1/2 cup of water, but look at all the water we're starting to see. So water is starting to come out of the fruit. So that 1/2 cup of water was just enough. Now I'm going to put these apple cores and apple peelings in a bag and save them to make apple scrap jelly. You can do the same thing, or you can discard them. So I'll put these in the freezer, and when I'm ready to make apple scrap jelly or apple syrup, they're in there. So the apples are nice and tender. So I'm going to use this old-fashioned potato masher to just mash them up a little bit. And what you can do also is take half of this applesauce out, run an immersion blender through it and blend up part of it, and then put the chunky part back in. There you go. So that's a good consistency right there. Now I'm going to add about 3/4 cup of sugar, a half a teaspoon of cinnamon, and a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. I'll give that a good stir, and then we'll give it a taste. Just a little more sugar. Give it another stir. Delicious. So I'm going to let it simmer for about 5 minutes, and then we'll put it in the jar. So my applesauce is done, and I'm ready to jar it up. And I'm going to put hot applesauce into hot jars. I've got my lids that have been simmering in warm water, not hot, just warm. I'll put my funnel on. So hot product is going into hot jars. And I use this saucer just to catch any little drips or drops. I don't always get them, but I try. For this particular recipe, I need a 1/2 inch of headspace. And then as always, we will run our debubbler around the jar just to make sure that we've got all the bubbles out, and we'll wipe our rims down with a damp cloth or paper towel. I like to use vinegar, but you can just use water. And then we'll lift out a lid and center it on our jar. And we just put that on finger tight. And then we'll put the jar back in the pot. And remember, best practice is you fill 1 jar at a time. And then we just do it all over again. And applesauce tends to be a bit messier than does jam and jelly. So you want to make sure you get that wiped off. Not only off the side of the jar, but off of the rim. Because remember, if there's any product on the rim, it can interfere with sealing. And we don't want that to happen. Center our lid. Screw our band on, just finger tight. And now our jar goes back into the camera. And we're going to fill this to 1/2 inch headspace. Once again, I got too much. There we go. Debubble it. Wipe our jar rim and the little ridges, because again, we want to make sure there's no product on the rim that can interfere with our lid sealing. Center the lid and put it on just finger tight, and back into the pot it goes. So I've got my heating element turned on, so I want this to come to a full rolling boil. And when it does, that's when I'll start my timer. So now you can hear it starting to heat up. When it comes to a full rolling boil, I'll start my timer. Now this jar is only half full, so I can't put it in the water bath like this because that's going to affect the sealing and all that kind of thing. However, I can set it in the fridge and then we'll use this one right away. And let's just give this a little taste. Absolutely delicious. And as you can see, it's now at a full rolling boil. So I'll start my timer, and these jars need to process for 20 minutes. Now here's something that I want to be sure to mention, and that is you do need to add additional processing time if you're at a high altitude or a high elevation. So I'll put a link in the description box below to the blog article on canning at high altitude. That way you can select the appropriate processing time for your location. The timer went off, so I turned the heat off. Now I'm going to remove the lid, and then I'm just going to let the pot just sit for 5 minutes. Just let it stand for 5 minutes. So I've let this stand for 5 minutes. Now I can get the jars out, and I'm going to set them on a clean towel on top of this cutting board. And you want to bring the jars straight up. Don't tip them, don't tilt them. Bring them straight up. Ooh, that one popped as soon as I brought it out. There goes another one. Look how beautiful they are. And oh, there was another pop. And I'm going to let these beautiful jars sit on the counter for the next 12 to 24 hours undisturbed. And one of the things I'll be looking for is that pop, pop, pop. And we've already heard 3 of them pop. But I'll also look to see if the center is now concave and that it doesn't flex at all when touched. But that's for 12 to 24 hours and not now. So I'll circle back tomorrow and we'll see how well they sealed. It's the next day and it looks like my jars have sealed. When I look at them, they've got a concave top, the little dimple is down. When I tap on them, the lid is not flexible, so it looks like they sealed beautifully. Another way to check for sealing, you should be able to lift the jar up with the lid. So if you pick it up with the lid and it holds, you're good to go. You're going to store your jars without the bands on because the bands can create a false seal. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, just in case they come loose and the bands are still on, you won't know that the seal has been compromised. So you want to make sure you store them without the bands on. And then we will label and date our jars. And you can just take a Sharpie and mark on the top, or you can take one of those dissolvable ball labels and put them on the front of the jar. Don't have any labels? Freezer tape will work just fine. According to the ball guidelines, this applesauce should be shelf stable in these jars for about 18 months. However, once you open them, you do need to refrigerate them. And if one of your jars didn't seal, you can put it in the fridge and enjoy it right away. So the next time you're out shopping and you see great prices on apples, or a family friend says, I've got all these apples and I don't know what to do with them, would you like some? The answer should be absolutely, because not only can you make applesauce, you can also make apple jelly, apple butter, apple pie filling. There's so many things you can do with apples, so don't turn them down. So if you enjoyed learning how to use a classic water bath canner, then watch this video next where I'll show you how to use an electric water bath canner. I'll see you next time.